Hi, I'm Dustin Abbott, and I'm here today to give you a little bit of a different type of review. And today we're going to be looking at a video switcher and controller from the AV company AVMatrix. This is the HVS0402U. And yeah, maybe not the very best name that they could have come up with. And its probably primary competitor is the Blackmagic Atem Mini or Mini Pro. And part of the reason why that's maybe the more popular of the two has a lot to do with the fact that that name rolls off the tongue a little bit more. But as we're going to discover today, this AVMatrix product actually has, I would say, more going on for it in terms of functionality and inputs, and so we're going to explore that together. Devices like this have become necessary in the last couple of years. Maybe for some people, for many people, they already were. But for someone like myself, before the pandemic, I really wasn't doing any kind of virtual events. I wasn't really concerned about live streaming or things like that. But there's a lot of new technologies that I've had to explore and discover along the way as a byproduct of trying to learn how to communicate. And I've done everything from doing virtual conferences to meeting with camera clubs virtually, and of course with other local and small groups for business meetings, etc., over Zoom and similar technologies. So trying to get continue to put your best foot forward in that requires some new bits of technology, and that's where something like this AVMatrix deck comes in. So let's take a closer look at what we've actually got here in terms of the control layout and everything that is a part of that. So taking a closer look at this, we can see that this is a really nicely made and really nicely functional, well laid out things. And it definitely has some advantages over either the Atem Mini or Mini Pro. And so one of those is it actually has an on-off switch. And so that's obviously very nice to have, to be able to control that independently. There is a lever here that allows you to transition in between your sources, which is obviously something that was not on the Atem Mini, and something I find to be very, very handy. You can program your different effects here, and there are even more that you can access through the menus, and then you can put them onto the slider, and so you can transition between those various sources. So that's a nice layout there. I'll also note that the menu layout here is controlled through this dial, which allows you to both click it and then to rotate it to access function. And the menu here is really in depth, and it's actually, there's basically all the functionality that you might typically find with other products on a computer. You can actually access all of those through the menu functionality right here, and so I find that to be a really great layout. And you get a standard feed here in the multi-view, as you can see on my little monitor here, and which gives you some live feedback of the various things that you've got going on. More on that in just a moment. So as far as the rest of the basic layout here, unlike the Atem Mini or Mini Pro, you don't just have your program output, but you also have a preview output here as well. So two different decks with two different, complete different set of controls there, which is obviously very handy to have. Now, when it comes to the output of these, what is really interesting is that there are multiple HDMI outputs. And so you can actually have a program mode that's going out to something where you're capturing. Right now, I'm capturing on OBS Studio, which is most commonly used because it's free and open source. But you can also have the multi-view. And so you can go out, as I'm doing here, you can output to a monitor, and then you could also output to another source with your other HDMI output there. Another handy thing there is that this does obviously have a USB-C port. USB-C is what actually I'm running out at the moment into my laptop for recording in OBS. But the nice thing about the USB-C here is that, number one, it eliminates the need for a capture card, from the actual deck, and so you're able to get a figure that can be used like for a webcam or things like that right out of this. So that's handy for things like Zoom, for example. But the other nice thing is you can actually program what goes out over that. And so instead of just, typically by default you would have your program mode, which is what you're seeing on screen right now, but you could also default this program view that I've got here. And so if you wanted to have that for whatever reason. And so obviously that's very handy. You can see here there's also some picture-in-picture controls, which I've been using somewhat. And what's unique here over the the Atem Mini is that instead of just having one picture-in-picture, you actually have two of them that you can control control on air. You also have the ability to use a logo, which you can see in the bottom portion of the screen there. You can program in your logos, more on that in just a moment, and take them on and off. There is various Chroma controls here, and we'll have a separate section on that in just a moment. And so you've got Chroma, you've got Luma, and then you've got a downstream chroming effect there as well. And you can control whether or not that's on air or not. Over here on the left side, you have audio controls, and so those will allow you to have independent functionality over a variety of different functions, which include two 3.5mm audio inputs you have right onto the deck itself, and you have a lot of controls in the menu on how there's going to function. One other nice thing is here on the right side is you actually have a headphone jack, and so you can actually do headphone monitoring right here in the effect itself. And so there's a lot of controls there that are really useful as a part of that. So let's take a quick look at how the actual Chroma functionality works and how it can you can use something like a green screen. So in this section, we're going to take a look at how Chroma works on this. And so I'm actually going to be using a static background as my source on this point. And so we're going to take a look at a background that's going to look something like this. And so I'll show you how we arrive at that destination and the various components that are going to be at play here. So we've got a few different inputs here. We have got my main camera here, which is going to be our key for this. And so you can see I've got a green screen behind me. I've got a secondary camera that I'm using as a part of this that is showing us what's on screen, and so for that capture. And then our third thing that we have got at play here, I'm gonna switch back for a moment, is that we have got our Chroma pattern, which if I cut to that is going to show you this kind of just standard background and the actual Chroma taking place. The other factor that we have got here is the ability to go on and off with my logo, which I have uploaded here. And so I'm going to just show you that on the side here there is a place to put in a USB drive, and as a byproduct of that I've been able to upload a few things, including the background, some different logos that I might want to use. And so you have the ability just at a touch to take that logo, to turn it on and off altogether, or you can take it on air and off air. And so easy thing to add there as a part of this. So right now we're looking at our feed from HDMI 3, which is obviously here of the AVMatrix deck itself. And then as a byproduct of that, I also have the option of using this as an overlay, which isn't necessarily the effect that I'm looking for. So there are basically three different functions that you're going to want to have access to here. First being the Chroma and taking it on air or not. In this case, we don't want to go to the main key thing because all you're seeing is my face interposed over this. So at this point, we're not going on air because I'm demonstrating, because of what I'm doing demonstrating here. But what I'm going to be looking at is the ability to have the pattern look here, and then to be able to cut back and forth between that. And so the cut button being large here and on the right is what's going to allow me to cut back and forth between those sources, or we could use an effect and wipe in between those depending on what we're doing. And even if I wanted to use this slide to kind of slide in between those two sources like this, or even have a part way, which obviously we don't want to do, but the slider is going to give me the ability to smoothly transition between those different items. Now you can see that the Chroma effect works, quite well for doing it all in box. There's no software involved in doing this. This is all being done right off of the switcher itself. And so I believe that the effect is pretty good. And obviously, Chroma is going to be improved by a couple of factors. The better that you can do the sampling on your actual background is going to help. The second factor that's really going to help is to have a little bit of distance between yourself or your subject and the background itself, the green screen or the blue screen, whatever you're using. In this case, that's not working so well, is that I don't have room for that at the setup where I'm at. And so my green screen is only a few feet behind me. And so obviously you can improve that by getting some distance, some separation between the subject and the background. But overall, I would say, with at least my limited experience in doing Chroma green screen type work, that it seems to work quite well once you get all the various pieces figured out. That did take me a little bit of time to figure out, and I think in some ways it's simpler if you don't have to have the factor of having a static kind of pattern background behind you, and you can just do your chroma key using a couple of inputs that are coming in from HDMI. That seems to work a little bit more simply, but I was, with a little bit of work, able to figure it out, and it works quite well. So obviously a good result when using Chroma, and the ability again to be able to control that all from within this unit without having to use a separate computer for that is really, really useful. And one of the, I would say, the highlights of this particular unit, the HVS0402U, is the fact that you can do all of these things independent right here from it. You don't have to use a computer to unlock extra functionality. Now, that's not to say that you can't use, you actually can virtually control this through Ethernet. You can have the control to where you can be away from the unit itself and you can control it over your laptop or something like that. But you don't have to rely on that. And so in this case, I'm actually going to my laptop here for the actual capture, but I don't have to worry about having to have maybe two windows up or two competing things going on. I can just function on running OBS here. All the other functionality I can run right from the AVMatrix. Other strengths include having this wide variety of inputs, all 4 HDMI inputs. They're all auto detected, and also having the outputs here is very useful as well, and where you have a lot of different options of not just getting your content out, but getting your content out maybe to multiple sources simultaneously. I enjoy having a slider functionality and the ability to transition between sources there while also applying effect as a part of the process. And then obviously you can just hit the cut button or even the auto button, which the auto button will automatically apply an effect. And so you have different ways of transitioning between your sources. But I really do like having the ability to have that slider and then also to have the actual visual readout of the slider control. So are there any negatives that have come up as a part of my review process? I'll first say that for me, there is a learning curve with devices like these. I've only done a couple of reviews of a couple of these different devices, and I'm typically, as you know, someone that's working in front of the camera for video. I'm not a behind the scenes guy. And so for me, there is a bit of a learning curve with these things. And with any device like this, you can see here that I don't have a lot of things hooked up, and yet you've got the worn and snaking of cables that are coming in and out. And so those cables have to come from somewhere. And so one thing I will point out is that, even after you have invested the money in buying the switcher, you're still going to have the various cables. It basically comes with the power cable. It did come with the USB cable out to connect, so the USB-C to the USB standard USB port, and so to connect into your computer. It did come with that cable, but all of the HDMI cables or any of those type things, obviously you're going to have to supply that separately. So, that's one maybe aspect of that. I also found that there were some of the functions that were just a little bit obscure. It took me a while to figure out how to do Chroma, for example. And, I kind of went around and around, and it was basically just a matter of maybe some of the controls being not as logically laid out for something like that as what they should have been. And finally, you've got another limitation here, which is unfortunately fairly common with these, but I will highlight it here, and that is your output is limited at 1080p up to 60 frames per second, but you're not going to get any kind of 4K functionality, which does limit your output for someone like myself who typically records all of my content in 4K. Again, as I said, it's a fairly common limitation of switchers like this, but it is one I wanted to highlight. So finally, you're paying about $549 for this, and while that is a little bit more expensive than what the Atem Mini Pro is selling for currently, I would say the functionality here is higher. It has a lot of features that are missing on the Atem Mini Pro, and it also allows you to do a whole lot more right inside here and not to have to rely on using a computer to achieve your end result. So at the end of the day, if you are looking for a quality switcher and the ability to control things for live stream, maybe running multiple cameras. And I will note one other feature that is really pretty awesome, and that is right in from inside here. You can actually set up your own user profiles, so not just upload your various logos and backgrounds to the actual device, which is great, not have to use computer for that, but you also can set up different profiles for a whole different setup, maybe with graphics and various things, and you can save those profiles. And so if you have like multiple type projects that you do on a regular basis, you can switch between those profiles, at just a few clicks and be ready to switch over without having to go through and to change all those menu settings or to rely on a computer to accomplish that. So the overall theme here when it comes to this particular unit from AVMatrix is the fact that it really is very well self-contained, a very functional menu that allows you to do what you want to do inside this without having to rely on a computer to do it. And I think that might make it very appealing for some of you that maybe want to move as simply and as lightly as possible. I'm Dustin Abbott, and if you'll look in the description down below, I do have linkage there to where you can get some various purchase options for this. And beyond that, there's linkage to follow myself or Craig on social media, to become a patron, to purchase channel merchandise, to check out our video-centric channel, Let the Light In TV. And of course, if you haven't already, please click that subscribe button right here on YouTube. Thanks for watching, have a great day, and let the light in.